The way I view sales enablement and how it's evolved is increasingly becoming this connective tissue in an organization to help what I like to think as go-to-market activation. As we're making strategic changes in the org, we need to operationalize those changes. We need to work together, connect the different parts of the company, very much like working hand in hand with product marketing, product management, to say, how do we take this and then sell it and operationalize that?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Future of Selling podcast. We are here to dive into trends, challenges, innovations that are shaping the sales landscape. I'm your host, Rick Smith. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Concur. Concur is a sales enablement platform that lives directly inside of Salesforce. So with Concur, there's no data syncs, there's no integrations, there's no anything to get in the way of performance for your sales team. So everything we do is based on reducing the friction in the selling motion, increasing the flow, and impacting results. So that's what we're about. We also work with some of the largest enterprise companies in the world. We're really proud of that. And, I've been in and around sales for most of my career, client success, COO, a CEO, and chief revenue officer as well, and now a chief customer officer at Concur. So that's kind of a little bit about our podcast, a little bit about me. But let's talk about our guest. Our guest today is Andrew D'Agostino. Andrew began working at an HR tech company when he was in college. And for 14 years, he was part of that journey. And I'm familiar with this company. I've kind of worked alongside of it, right? But for 14 years, he was with this company. He went from startup to over $50 million in revenue. So the guy has got tons of experience. He's going to have a ton of things to share with us today. He actually held 9 different job titles and went through 10 or over 10 acquisitions. I can't imagine that. So it's a lot of acquisitions to go through, but I'm sure that's going to come up at some point or another. And he spent his last 4 years as a leader in sales enablement. So Andrew has been with, and you know what? I'm going to stop calling him Andrew now. His name, we call him AD internally, and I think that's what everybody else calls him. So Aiden has been with us for about 3 weeks here at Concur, but he's just that kind of guy that he feels like he's been here for 3 years. He just kind of immediately jumped into the team and is already having an impact on our organization, on our clients, and everything that we're doing. So AD, welcome. Glad you're here on the podcast today.
Happy to be here, Rick. I'm really excited for this, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always like to start with a few fun facts, right? Because it's one thing to have a guest on and talk about all the cool things we just said, the 14 years and, and all the things, but I want people to know you're like a real person, like, like they can kind of connect with you. So I got a few fun facts here that we put together and just run them by you. You can comment on them if you want. But fun fact number 1, you own a farm. I had no idea you had a farm. And on top of that, you're a budding real estate mogul. So that's kind of cool, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's been an adventure. I never thought my life would take me here. It just kind of happened in one of those magical ways. Yeah, we have about 7 acres in upstate New York. And right now we just have a couple horses and barn cats and otherwise, but we used to have a whole farm. So we had goats and we had sheep, we had alpacas, we had 2 exotic animals. So this African ram, it's called an aoudad. This thing was wild, huge curling horns. And then we had an exotic small deer. They're called muntjac deers. We're about like this big off the ground. So it's been a really cool thing to be a part of this.
Oh, wow. My wife would love that. She wants to have a farm, and I'm like, all right, maybe one of these days. So anyway, that's fun fact number 1. That's interesting. You also have a master's degree in and organizational psychology, which immediately connected with me because I've spent like a number of years, almost 12, 15 years working for organizations that were their principal offering was science based on industrial organizational psychology. So that's really cool. In college, you were a coxswain, and tell me, I looked it up, right? But for anybody else who's listening, they're like, what the heck is that? Give us 15 seconds of what that means and what you were doing.
Yes, yeah, it's so funny. So yeah, I was a lot skinnier and lighter in college, so about 135 pounds, but I wanted to do sports. And what do you do when you're that small? I came
Right.
across a rowing team on campus, and they're like, "You're perfect for this." Yeah, and I
Right.
spent the next 4 years in the back of the boat. We were staring ahead, and all the rowers are facing you.
Right.
And I learned how to steer the boats. Really good leadership skills. I would highly recommend this
Yeah.
for younger kids. You have to command, you have to correct, you have to plot a course. It's amazing. So I spent 4 years, 4:20 a.m.
Oh,
Waking
wow.
up, and we'd be on the river, and then until 7:30 a.m. And then I coached a little bit afterwards for about a year and a half. So it,
Yeah.
it was it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. That's really cool. Are you still getting up at 4:20 a.m.? Is that the
No.
story? Sleep
No, I had to
later?
give it up.
All
I
right.
tried to make it work with a career, and I
Yeah.
give so much credit to those who are able to. But I was,
Yeah.
waking up 4:30 and getting back around at like 10:30 p.m.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. A lot of really neat things in your background, right? From being a part of that startup and that whole journey that you were on, and I think that's will kind of help lead us into some of the conversation today. So, today we're going to talk about and we're going to focus on sales enablement, right? Which is really
Mhm.
where Conquer lives anyway. We live in that space. So, but with your expertise, I think it'll be a really good conversation. So let me ask you first, how do you define sales enablement and why is that? Why do you believe that's so critical for a modern sales organization?
Oh, it's a good question, a big question. Yeah. And I think my answer would have been different if you asked me this 10 years ago, because a lot has
Yeah.
changed in this whole space, really, really evolving over the past years. Um, the way I view sales enablement and how it's evolved is it's increasingly becoming this connective tissue in an organization to help what I like to think as go to market activation. And so, really, as we're making strategic changes in the org, um, we need to operationalize those changes. We
Right.
need to work together, connect the different parts of the company very much like working hand in hand with product marketing and product management to say, how do we take this and then sell it and operationalize that? That's how
Right.
I kind of view it. And I
Okay.
think I would also add that, like, it's almost this happened in my past life where it evolved, like starting with sales enablement, but it morphed into broader go to market enablements to
Okay.
bring in the account management teams and help activate them,
Yeah.
to work with marketing. And so there's a lot of like pieces that are coming together.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good because I remember back rewind 15 years ago, sales enablement was really all about training, right? Or that's
Yes.
that's how we defined it at one of the companies I was at. You looked at somebody in sales enablement, they were basically training the sales team how to sell, how to
Yeah.
talk about their products. But from your perspective, it's gotten much bigger than that. You really are kind of to some degree playing the point guard of the
That's
team,
right.
right? Pulling everybody together and making sure that the plays are running. So that's cool. What do you think the key components of a high impact sales enablement strategy looks like? I mean, I'm a big list guy. I'm always thinking about what's the top three, what's the top five. So
Yeah.
what do you think? What are the key elements?
Number one is a very close connection to leadership and making sure that you're prioritizing the initiatives that are top of mind in the organization. So really you're helping them to activate the strategies and to use your language to the plays that you're about to run. So it's
Right.
staying very close to kind of what is the focus, what's the KPIs that we're looking for, what is the Q1, Q2, Q3 annual goals, and that becomes like a foundation.
Right.
The second thing I would say is your job in enablement, I think, is really about translating. It's about taking things and then turning that into language that other functions will in the organization will understand. And so they know their place relative to number one, which is the strategy that you're trying to execute.
Okay.
Yep. And then I think the third one is making sure what we're doing is for revenue, I should say. It's like moving revenue forward. I think this is something that enablement teams have to watch out for. Is you're going to get bombarded with lots of requests around the organization, but our jobs are at the end of the day are to advance revenue, and everything needs to be in that line.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, those are kind of the top ones, I think.
Got it. So close connection with leadership and make sure you're in prioritization, which is so important because in a company like
Mhm.
ours, or in any if you're in your startup, right, that you were in, there's so many things, right, to take your attention away from what matters. And truly it all matters, right? But at some point you got to prioritize, you got to decide, okay, what's first, what's second, what's third. So
Yeah.
prioritization, translating and turning it into the language that everybody can speak, and getting everybody on the same page, and then making sure that you're moving the revenue forward as a target. Okay.
Yeah, I have one more to add. This is like, as enablement, you can be the secret weapon of an executive team, of the CRO, CSO, because our job is also to be a feedback loop to leadership on how things are progressing in the organization, what's really going on under the hood, and then being able to say, great, we want to do this strategy. Here are the blocks that I found in the organization that we should talk about moving forward. And they may not know at the top, right? And so your job is to help like be this feedback loop for them as well.
Right. Got it. Got it. Okay. That's perfect. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that face sales teams today, or probably sales enablement teams today? What do you see?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this earlier because it's so funny, joining Conquer, and you're a big proponent of the friction versus flow concept, and I think that really resonates with me because I see that in enablement. Our job is to simplify. Like
Okay.
we cannot. Our sellers are trying to manage so many different components at the same time, and our job is to help them make that easier.
Right.
So whatever we do, we need to like put this through a lens of simplicity.
Yeah.
Whether that's people, process, operations, data, it all has to be put through a lens of simplicity.
So to turn that into simplicity, I think part of that probably is making sure that and I think that may go back to one of your other points, but just making sure that everybody can easily consume the information, and also speaking the same language, right? Because there's
Yes.
nothing more distracting than having the sales team talk about what you do one way, having the customer success team talk about what you do another way, and then you got other people that are somewhere in between. So
Yep.
how do you do that? How do you align that, right? Because everybody sees the elephant from a different perspective, but you're trying to get everybody in one kind of from one point of view. So what's the magic between pulling those teams together to speak the same language?
This is probably some enablement team's biggest challenges.
Okay.
I have found success, and what I would recommend is creating a common like framework to work off of that you can then align teams to. So I've had a lot of success with different sales methodologies or go-to-market methodologies in the past.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of Medic because it's kind of like this is just the how it is, and everyone can wrap themselves around like, oh, these are the metrics we know. Here's the
Right.
decision process. Um, and so using Medic as a framework. Also, I have found a good common language. We've implemented force management in my past life, but a way that really just gives people the way to look at something and speak about it. So that we know, for example, that we call PBOs, positive business outcomes. We can say, what's the PBO of the account that you have, customer service manager, or to the sales rep, what's the positive business outcomes of the prospect that you're talking to? And so now you've given them a way to speak to each other. And so finding that framework is really important.
It sounds like installing kind of a common language, right? I know in one of the
Yes.
startups I was in, that was a big piece of it, right? Just again, getting everybody talking from the same, not the same script, but a common language that brought everyone together, right?
Yeah.
So, if for anybody that doesn't under or have never heard the term force management, give us a little bit more around that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and it's just they're another methodology that I found very successful. I've implemented multiple methodologies. I had success with challenger sales. If you're not familiar with them, it's another methodology. And force management is really great methodology that has some buy-in components up vertically in the organization and horizontally, and they just give us a way to talk to each other and to analyze something. The way that I view what I said earlier with Medic, I love Medic because it is your X-ray device into an opportunity, into accounts, into an upsell, and basically it's a way that you can view that opportunity at a specific point in time, just as a doctor would do an X-ray. And then a methodology is really helpful because it's the treatment plan. It's the way said, okay, here's the X-ray, here's what I'm seeing, and then here's how we get them to the next step, and the treatment of whatever the methodology is and how to move the deal forward.
When you think about sales enablement, what are some of the key metrics for you? I mean, I'm a big proponent of you got to know what your targets are. For me, chief customer officer, right? What's our gross retention? What's our net retention? What's our CSAT? What's our NPS? What about you? What from a sales enablement standpoint, what are the big metrics that say, yep, we're killing it, or we got some work to do here?
Yes, and this is, I think, all enablement people are trying to define this. In some organizations, it's better defined than others. But one of the things is how big your organization is will impact this and where you report into. So if you're more traditional like sales enablement, if you're doing a good job at enablement, your sales process, your sales cycle should be faster. So smaller sales cycles. So you should be able to, move through the process faster and ultimately get to deal close faster. I think like time between stages, however you're defining that in your process, right? You can have a real big impact at certain stages. Maybe not so much in the legal phase. We might be able to impact that, but like moving from prospect into opportunity, you can really have an impact. And ultimately, I think if you're doing a good job at sales enablement, then you should ultimately tracking the size of your opportunities, right? Size of the deals closed. Because if you're able to better influence a rep, and be able to offer more, make a better compelling point, make the pain a little bit deeper for that a prospect, you should be able to see higher deals because of that.
Got it.
I would say those are a good focus.
Shorter sales cycle, improve velocity by stage as well. And then also just size of the opportunities and deals that are closing you should see those increasing. So have you measured that before in your past, is there a good way to measure that from your perspective in some of your past roles?
Yes. And this is another little tip that if in enablement, you should become best friends with your RevOps individuals and colleagues, because this is important and you can make a lot of influence together rather than separate. But they're also your best friend at getting this information and being able to say, okay, here's where we're at right now, and here's where we want to be. Let's start moving the needle. So I found there's a lot of things that influence deal size, and that's a little bit harder and lagging indicator. But deal velocity, speed, you can track a little bit faster. And so I usually like to start there. Let's try and improve that. Sorry, there's one more that which I think we're going to talk about a bit, but ramp time of new reps is also somewhere you can have a direct impact pretty quickly.
I get the ramp time. That's an easy one for me to follow, right? You're better, you're better trained. They understand they don't have to make tons and tons of mistakes to get there, right? You're showing them, hey, here's the path. How does a strong sales enablement approach and team and strategy increase velocity?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways that this, operationalizes. So one is if you're training, coaching, giving reps a better way to talk to their prospects, they should be able to qualify in or out much more quickly. And I used to talk about this and I know we're going to bring this into Conquer, but ruthless qualification. It is so important to be ruthless about it. I'd say that very cheekily, but I've seen so many reps spend time on the wrong opportunities that we're never going to go anywhere. or that we're a pie in the sky. And it's just, you have to train them to be able to move quicker, in or out, get the deal moved faster, or don't spend your time on it. It's just not worth it. And so that's where I've seen like a lot of impact. I think too, if you're giving the reps the right materials and assets and the right training, they should be able to say things and deliver assets to their prospects that help make the case more quickly and move them through the
That makes
process
sense.
faster.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay. Ruthless qualification. That's I don't remember that.
Yes.
I like that. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
How do you, from a sales enablement standpoint, how do you make sure that your sales reps are actually implementing what they're learning, what they're, what basically what you're teaching them? And how do you keep up with that?
This is the ultimate, like, I think, you know, this is the hardest part of the job. And especially as the organization, if you're a smaller organization and you're moving so quickly, it's hard to actually measure transfer of training. At the end of the day, I try and, like, either if my enablement team or if it's just me, really staying close to the reps after you've deployed a change, watching their Gong calls to see if they're using this. If you're using Gong, whatever recording service you're using, you're able to like measure their data and be a part of the sales leaders' conversations. So whoever the sales manager is, enablement should be on those meetings with that sales manager to be able to see if like effects are taking hold. And if they're not, that's data for us. That's why. Why did this intervention not improve? So it's a lot of looking at that RevOps data too to understand, hey, um, are these leading or lagging indicators that I'm deploying? Like, should I see something immediately, or maybe it's going to take some time? And as long as we all are aware of that and we're tracking it to see if that's improvement is occurring.
Yeah. Okay. If I were a new sales enablement leader or person that came into a company, let's say they've got a wheels off approach to their sales, how important is it in creating should I think about creating a certification process? Is that one of the ways that I make sure the sales team is actually taking what we're providing them, the training we're providing them, and using that in the field, or is that a bad idea?
No, it's not a bad idea at all. I think it could definitely help. A lot of this, I would say, all the trainings that enablement does or interventions are really also impacted by the managers
Okay.
of the field, right? So whether this is a sales VP, sales manager, account manager, VP, whatever it is, it's making sure you're close to that layer as well, because they're going to support you in this. And they're also going to give you the feedback. Sometimes it's hard to get feedback as an enablement team. And you really are being close with RevOps and this layer of management, you can get that information quicker. And they'll tell you if like this is not working, or hey, only a piece of this worked. We need more help here. You won't know that if you're not talking to these groups.
So feedback has come up a couple of times now, just making sure that you're connected with the leadership team, certainly connected with the individual sellers as well, right? I mean, that's important, but making sure that you're connected with the leadership team, gathering that feedback from them, and then kind of using a cycle, get the feedback and then re-engage that into what you're doing is an important key.
Yeah. And I think too, there's ways now with technology that this is much easier than it was for me like 10, 15 years ago. Enablement teams should have also like a really easy, I think it's so easy to do, and not enough teams do this. Just create like a form and whatever project management tool you're using and
Yeah.
deploy to the field. Make sure that it's in their faces so that they are that people in the field can easily say this worked, this didn't, or hey, I'm missing this asset. And you'll be surprised. Once you give the field a tool like that, you're going to start getting so much inputs, almost not like too much, but in a good way, right? Now you can make decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. One of my beliefs is for things like this, you've got to have a clear point of entry. Where am I going to put that feedback, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I end up, if I'm the seller, I'm in an engagement with a customer or a prospect, and I don't have something. I'm like, well, what do I? Okay, I don't have something. What do I do with this need? Who do I tell? I ended up writing on a piece of paper, and it never goes anywhere. But if you've got something like you're talking about that you've put in place that says, okay, here's your point of entry. You have feedback, put it here. I could see that being really, really effective for the
Yeah.
field and for sales enablement as well. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Being around kind of the industry for a while, I know that, you know, more experienced sales reps may struggle more than newer reps with a new enablement initiative, right? Or, here's how we need to say things. Here's how we need to present things. Have you come up against that? And if so, how did you navigate that and get through it?
Yeah, it is a real it's a real thing that happens. It is absolutely. Uh
Yeah. All right. That's good.
no, it's you did not. It's depending on like what sales framework you're using, they have different terms for this, like a lone wolf, for example, in a challenger world. But
Yeah.
or like the person who's just really focused on how they've done sales. So here's the reality. Sometimes they're never going to get there. And that's
Okay.
a management challenge and something that why enablement needs to stay close with this management layer to be able to give feedback.
Right.
But it's also something where I've found success being professionally persistent and direct with these individuals tends to help. So for example, in the past when I've had this, I'll book like a 30-minute check-in with them or a 15-minute. And I will be direct, like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. I notice that you're not using it. I do want to talk about it because I want to make sure that we're both on the same page and we can move forward together. And I feel that a lot of reps respond well
Yeah.
to those conversations because that's how they operate, right?
Yeah.
They're a seller. They're trying to move prospects and buyers forward, and they're very direct. So sometimes you need to change your intervention style in a tactful way.
I agree with you. I think people want to be engaged, right? And taking that approach, what you're really doing is saying, "Hey, I value you. I don't expect you just to listen to what I'm saying and follow the rules, right? Because a lot of people don't like to follow the rules, right? But they do want to be valued, and they want their point of view valued. I think that's a great. I don't know if that's a strategy or a tactic, but whichever it is, I think that's a great way to approach that. AI is everywhere. It's on the scene everywhere. We've been talking about, I think, on every podcast that we've had so far. How is AI impacting sales enablement?
It's amazing. I'm going through this right now, Rick, like because the explosion is happening, like the tech and the of AI, and it's so cool. And it took me a little while, but now I'm so on board. Even just joining Conquer here, and I'm trying to get my bearings and deploy different strategies. I'm able to create like a presentation of like things that we've done in the past, in a past life, and bring it here. Able to do that in 30 minutes to an hour, which would
Right.
usually have taken me multiple days.
Yeah.
I'm able to, even my first week here, trying to wrap my head around like industry snapshots, market analyses. I'm able to produce that without having to do all of the legwork of research
Yeah.
much faster, get it to 90% of the way there,
Right.
and then check it on the experts internally to make sure it's correct. So I would say like getting your bearings and doing your research is much easier, I think, with the AI presenting concepts. There's so many presentations that enablement people have to create. And it's so helpful to have a tool that gets you 75, 80, 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
Um, I would say also just like strategies. I remember not too long ago, I'm like, I put into an AI program, like, how should I this is what I want to do. I want to like build this asset in this program. How should I approach this? And I get that back now. And
Yeah.
so it's so much faster.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, I agree. I have some of the same experiences. Things that normally would have taken me, you start with an empty whiteboard and you go, okay, well, let me put my storyboard together and then let me start creating the content or blah, blah, blah. And it takes, like hours and hours of deep work. Now you just put it in and go, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I need. And you've got
Yep.
an 80% solution in place and then go from there. So yeah, it's great. Other than shortening the creativity curve, right, and making things more efficient, are there any other ways that we should be thinking about integrating AI into sales enablement? I mean, you mentioned Gong a minute ago, right? I know Conquer we have some of our own AI features and products that to help in coaching. So what else?
Yeah, I want to hit on the Conquer recordings because I love the way that we're using it, and I'm so excited to get the information that we produce here. I'd say enablement has had trouble in the past, like following up and watching calls, listening to calls, getting the summary points, and like with Conquer's tech. I can now do that. I can see how the reps in the field are processing their conversations. And then I can understand, oh, hey, it sounds like they don't have a good grasp of this concept. I think that these words that they're using can be improved. Maybe we should have a workshop around that. Or maybe they're missing something and they just don't know something exists. That is a critical piece of enablement, is centralizing all of this. And so this feedback loop of recordings that Concur is able to produce
Yeah.
and getting that information into like a summary that I can consume
Yeah.
between meetings, that's huge. So I'm loving that aspect of AI as well.
Yeah. I think the other cool thing about this particular feature, we call AI Insights, obviously, right? Is you get the recordings, you get the summary, but we also provide that call score, right? And I think about it like this, right? If I've got a team of 5 or 10 sellers that are working for me, and I've got recordings of all their conversations, well, that's great because I didn't have to sit on that call. I can just get the conversation. I can put it in 1.5 speed, right? So that's a real time saver. The problem is if I got
Yeah.
10 people and I've got 5 conversations apiece, now I've got 50 conversations to listen. So it comes down to, okay, well, how do I decide what I'm going to listen to? But having the score there is such a game changer, right? So now I can look at, okay, well, I want to listen to their best calls, or I want to listen to the ones that didn't score very well, and then also understanding the variables that created that score. So I think AI around coaching and overall enablement is going to be huge. Sounds like you're kind of
Yeah.
in the same camp.
I love that. And it's something I'm so excited to dig deeper with here at Conquer because, in my industrial organizational life, we talk about critical incidents. You want to understand the very good and the very bad. If you have 50 things to look at, right, you can boil it down to five and really get like the ends of the spectrum. We can do that now with these call scores because I can easily see, hey, these are the best conversations, and these are the ones that have the most opportunity for improvement. It's pretty awesome to see this technology coming more into the front.
Yeah, I agree. And just, I'll make one more comment and I'll let it go. The other really cool thing I think there is just bias, right? I've been, coaching and leading and that stuff for a long time. And you just know that there are days where you're not on top of your game. You're not as good as you were yesterday. Whatever happened, you're tired, you didn't sleep well, something came up, whatever. But the ability for that AI component to it didn't need a good night's sleep. It didn't,
Mhm.
it's not in a bad mood. It's not where so it kind of takes all the bias out of it. And as a leader or as a sales enablement leader or as a coach, that helps center me right on what really happens. So it's less bias and more objective. And I love that aspect of it. Besides AI and maybe besides AI insights, what other tools are just really important to make sure if I'm a sales enablement leader that I've got in my tool belt?
Have a minimum level of proficiency into your CRM that you're using internally because you're going to be constantly pulling reports, working with your RevOps team to kind of generate results. So I think that's really important. I think a project management tool is huge. I mean, I cannot overstate that enablement teams need to have priorities and ways to build their projects out, because another name for enablement is change management. Like
Okay.
that is what we're doing here. We're making change, and you need to be able to track that.
Yeah.
Um, you need to have some presentation and design capabilities. So, design, you can work with whatever design resources your marketing team or whoever else internally can help spruce things up. I think that's important, especially also assets. A lot of assets need to get created, put into the world. And then the last thing I would say is on tools is here at Conquer, starting to think about this as well, is how do we create whatever tool you're using, a central warehouse that is easily accessed by the field, and they can get assets, they can get their learnings, they can do everything all in one place. Now, depending on your company, this might be like a SharePoint, this might be another tool, it could be Google Sites. There's so many tools out here, but get things into a way that the field can consume. I mean, that is half the battle
Yeah.
in enablement.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day, how important just having a home base is, right?
Yeah.
Of whatever your documentation is, whether it's processes, it's enablement content, whatever it is, because now, it could be posted in Slack, it could be posted on on some sort of support site. There's tons of places for it to be posted, but it's got to live somewhere. So you got to have that home base where people know they can go for the latest and the greatest version that may exist.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, the friction versus flow. The more friction I'll be blunt, salespeople do not like friction, and if they run up into it, they're just gonna stop. They're just not gonna proceed. So you have to take the friction out of everything you're doing and simplify access,
Yeah.
get them into flow.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. What do you think, as we kind of look into the future, if I were someone who is thinking about going into sales enablement, what are some of the most important skills I need to have in place? I mean, you talked about, proficiency in CRM, project management tools, things like that. What are some of the most important skills I need to have to be successful in this line of work?
Yeah, and I don't know, like, you need to have a core in this function of of good soft skills. I think a lot of this could starts with there. So being curious is huge for this. We have to be able to say, "Oh, how does that work? Why are we doing it like that? What are they using right now?" Being curious about everything is a huge component. I think being confident enough to have conversations with a variety of levels in the organization and different functions. You do not need to be experts, but you need to be able to connect to people, because as that connective tissue, you're going to be talking to all these different functions, all these people, leaders, people in the field. That's really important. I think you need some level of organizational skills, planning and organizing. Again, when an enablement team goes live, you're going to start getting all of these different functions asking for assets and trainings and everything. But you need to make sure that that's organized and prioritized, and you're not forgetting the number one that we opened up with, which is connection to the revenue goals of the organization.
Right.
That's our job at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Everything else is in service of that.
Let's do this though. If someone's listening to this podcast, right, and they've listened to the whole thing, and hopefully, it's been a great conversation, but they want to walk away with three key takeaways. What would the three key takeaways be from your point of view? I mean, I'll kind of jump in here too, but I always like to, if needed, but I always like to find, what would, if I were someone having coffee with you and I said, man, I'm walking into a new sales enablement situation, right? What should I be thinking about? What are the three things you'd leave them?
I think it would depend if they're new to the function or not, but I think regardless, understand how your company, the organization you're going into or you're currently in, makes money. That is so
So it's
important.
the whole revenue thing, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's why you're there. By the way, don't forget that.
Yes. And it sounds so silly when you say
Yeah.
it, but I feel like that is a step that often gets glossed over, because again, your job is to help them make more money, keep more customers, lose less money. So I think understanding how your organization makes money, I would say doing like a needs analysis at either like at when you're joining the organization or just regularly throughout a given calendar year or fiscal year. Understand like, okay, what are the priorities right now for this quarter? Where are we? Maybe even rate your parts of your organization on their like assets and processes. I think doing this needs analyses are important. And then I would say the third thing is, we touched on this, is but see yourself as that connective tissue. And don't wait for someone to tell you what to do, this, to do that. Your job is to operate, is to cut through the noise and connect or pieces of the organization together in service of the goals. So just have conversations. Um, Make sure you're plugged into everywhere. Understand how functions are using them, where they're not doing a great job right now, and can you help?
Yeah, got it. I love those, man.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna kind of run back through them, right?
Yeah.
So I love the first one because you can, sometimes you can get so dialed in on the minutia of the day you forget the big picture, right? And so understand how your company makes money and stay connected to the revenue, right? I mean, that's why you came in, right? That's why you're there. Um, Second one is the needs analysis, and I love that one as well, right? Understanding what the priorities are, and then being able to kind of take those chunk by chunk. I really like the idea of kind of companies grow quarter at a time, right? So, what are the we call them rocks, but what are the 3 to 5 rocks that we got to get done this quarter, right? What are those highest
Mhm.
priorities? So, needs analysis probably looks like interviews, probably looks like maybe a SWOT analysis,
Yep.
things of that nature, right? And then the last one is just, and this is powerful, see yourself as a connective tissue. Right, and I think there's some power in that mental imagery of knowing, "Hey, this is my job. My job is to come in and connect that team with that team and that team and that team," and you kinda made a part of that is this is my phrase, be a driver versus being a doer. Because drivers can always do. Doers sometimes have a hard time driving, right? So I love the phrase "be a driver" versus just a doer, and both are necessary, both are needed, right? But in a position like this, you're having to cut through getting the relationships, get the conversations going, and connect those tissues. So I think those are incredible. Um, Very good, man. Anything else? Anything else that we missed today, or are we good?
I think I think we hit most of it. The only thing, I would say, enablement looks different in different organizations, depending on how
Okay.
sophisticated the organization is. So, wherever you are in the organization, whether you're plugged into marketing, whether you're in sales, you're still there to help revenue. So it doesn't matter where you report into, and what your level is. Just
Okay.
have that view of connected tissue. It's the only thing
Okay.
I'd add.
Got it. Love it. All right. Hey, AD, thank you so much for the time today. Appreciate you being on the podcast or the show. And I know you and have got some time later today to catch up. So we'll see you a bit later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick. This has been great.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a
Yeah,
good day.
thanks.
All right. Bye bye.